Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with another model showcase video for this cartoon scale German Panzer 38T. The model that we have here is built for my own personal collection, is not for sale and or purchase. However, like I often mention in these videos, I frequently take on commission build projects from models ranging between 1/35th scale and 1/6 scale. For availability and pricing information, that information would be best by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@EastCoastArmory.com. This model here is built predominantly out of the box, and we'll be going over all of the aspects that this kit has, in addition to giving the model a thorough in-box review. So stay tuned because there's going to be a ton of content coming right at you. To start this video off, let's go ahead and take a quick walk around this model. And this vehicle here is the German 38T. Or at least it's supposed to be. What this vehicle is, it's a caricaturized 38T from the video game War Toons. Which, if you check your calendars, you'll see it's April 1st, making this vehicle part of the ECA channel's tradition of doing these caricaturized model showcase video reviews. War Toons is an online video game that's been around for a few years now, and it takes place in a World War II time setting. However, what makes the game unique is that it has this weird cartoony art style to it, similar along the lines of like Team Fortress 2 or something. But what's really cool about the game is that there has been a range of plastic model kits from the vehicles in the game that have been released for a number of years now. What's really cool about the vehicles is that they have the look and the feel of the vehicle in question, in this case a 38T, but again they're in this weird cartoony type format, which makes them for a very unique and interesting build. The models must be very popular because every year it seems like there's new kits out there in the World War Toons range. And this is true for not just tanks, but they also have a range of airplanes as well. Of course, these kits are also in the cartoony format that you see here. Before we go any further, let's go ahead and take a step back to when this model was first started in order to get a good idea on what the base starter kit supplies you with. And here's the model at the start of the build. For the base starter kit, I'll be utilizing this Meng War Toons German Panzer 38T light tank kit. As with all of the World War Toons kits, these models here are still really easy to come by, and this one here I picked up off of eBay for about 20 bucks or so. This model has been sitting in the stash for about 6 months, so it's usually about this time of the year where I start these models in order to get them ready for the release date. With the shrink wrap removed, you get a better view of the box art and the graphic design, which that's going to be the first thing that we're going to discuss. Here we have the vehicle in question, which is a stylized 38T. The box art is the same quality as the other World War Toons kits that I've done reviews on in the past. With the shrink wrap removed, you get a better view of the box art as well as the remainder of the graphic design. The box art itself is done in the typical format with these other World War Toons vehicles, where we have a painterly relief of the vehicle in question. I really dig the art style, and also the illustrator does a good job with balancing out the cartoonish aspect, but also getting some nice crisp detailing rendered on the illustration. As for the rest of the graphic design, it's quite typical for the vehicles in the Meng World War II range, where we have these two vertical diagonal lines that cut across. And as I frequently mention in these videos, this is done to give a little bit more shelf appeal. When you have a number of these kits lined up on a shelf, you have a nice continuous banner running across. This is not just true for the vertical lines, but also with the way the logos are laid out with the piece. On this side here, we have the Meng Model Company logo, along with the kit number, which is WWT-011. On the opposite side, we have the World War Toons video game logo, and it's housed in this little gear-esque looking like banner section. On the bottom portion, we have the remainder of the verbiage, which gives you, obviously, the name of the vehicle in question. On the side portions, we have the same type of illustration that's found on the box art, only we get to see a little bit more of it because it's not cut with those two vertical lines. But you also have the other type of information that I mentioned before. Same is true for the tab found on the opposite side. Here we have some other corporate information, and then on the opposite side here, we have a little sample of a profile of the vehicle side as well as the front portion. On this portion over here, we have some more corporate info about the company Rookvan, which I believe was the game developer that produced the World War Toons video game. On the rear portion of the box, we have some more information, namely the advert here for the World War Toons video game, and below that we have two screenshots of this vehicle in-game. We have some other corporate information on this side over here, as well as also the little branding saying that this kit is Olga approved. So that's it for the exterior. Let's go ahead and crack this box open. All of the World War Toons kits are a side opening type box, which is something that's fairly unique. You don't really see that on mainstream plastic model kits out there, specifically tank ones. And all of the contents, just like with all the other World War Toons models, are self-contained in this one plastic bag. This kit, along with the other kits in the World War II range, are made almost exclusively from injection molded plastic. The only components that are not made out of hard plastic are the tracks, which are made out of a single piece flexible type material. Let's go ahead and open the bag over here to get to the kit contents. Looks like I got a little too close to the instruction manual, but I think I should be able to manage just fine. So with the parts all dumped out, here you get to see the runners that are supplied with this kit. Obviously, this is going to be a very simplistic model, which is another trademark found on the vehicles in the World War II's range. Starting with the hull, this is a loose component, and just like with the other kits in the World War II's range, the plastic is a nice chunky bit of material, which will make for a very robust and a solid feeling model once fully completed. It has on it all of the provisions for mounting on the row wheels, and we also have a little bit of detailing over here, which appears to be some kind of a suspension component. The next runner over here contains both the components for the suspension as well as also the turret. The suspension has that stylized look of a 38T with those big, large dish wheels. We also have here some sprockets and idler details, return rollers, and the remaining of the details are for the turret itself. Here we have the turret. Note it does have some rivet detailing on it. All the details found on the molded parts are nice and crisp, although of course it is a cartoonish subject matter, but the quality of the moldings are still really good. On the same sprue we have some Pioneer tools, like a sledgehammer, a shovel, a little bit of tow cable, and all the hubcaps are present with their little fastener details molded on. On the last runner, we have the remainder of the components, which would include some parts for the upper hull construction, namely the entire upper hull piece right here. Note it has not only the body sections, but also its tin work integrally molded on. And just like with the other parts I mentioned, the quality of the moldings are really good. Over here you can see the piece for the front portion of the turret, along with the front armor plate, and even the rear plate with all of its fittings integrally molded on. This is the main armament right here. I like the way they molded this section with this hollow cavity on it. Perhaps I might be able to drill this out a little bit further, but we'll see how that pans out as the build continues. This here is the commander's cupola, and also the exhaust manifold. Carrying on takes us to the track bands. Like I stated before, the tracks are made out of a single piece flexible vinyl type material. The detailing on them is quite good for the medium, and again, it's representative of the subject matter at hand, being this cartoonish type vehicle. So if the camera gets in focus, you get to see the detailing found on the front portion of the track links. And on the inner section over here, we have those little horizontal lumps that are integrally molded on to simulate the inner track detailing. These tracks have had some really good luck in the past with painting and weathering, and I'm anticipating no problems with this one here as well. Here we have a little water slide decal sheet. From the other builds that I've touched upon before, I've had some really good results with the quality of decals that are supplied with these World War II's models. And again, I'm not predicting anything different with this one here. One final thing to mention with the supply parts is the instruction manual, or I should say the now slightly trimmed instruction manual. The World War II's instructions are a bit more thought out compared to some of the other instruction sheets that are supplied with other kits. Generally, you have just some CAD drawings on a white plain piece of paper that's folded or sometimes stapled together, depending on the kit. And with these ones here, though, you do have a little bit more presentation. So if I open up, you'll see that the piece looks much more aesthetically advanced compared to some of the other options that I mentioned. And with the way the CAD drawings are laid out, they're nice, clear, and concise, and are generally really well done and will assist you greatly during the duration of the build. These kits are known for their simplicity of assembly, and this one here, I'm not anticipating anything different. On the very back portion of the manual, we have just a nice little color chart along with the suggestion points for applying the markings, which always come in handy when you're building one of these models. Starting with the model suspension, this model utilizes the same type of wheel assembly system as found on many of the other World War Toons tanks, where we have the wheel and it's held in place with a single spindle. The design is well thought out, it's very robust, and the tank does have some playability to it. If you want to push this thing across the rug, the tracks will definitely roll. Of course, on this one here, I'm not going to do that because if you do that, the paint and the weather around the tracks are going to chip off in a very, very quick manner. But if you are looking for something with a little bit more playability in mind, these kits in general are really good for that. On the wheel installation, one tip that I recommend is generally on these World War Toons models, the stems are very snug when it comes time to install them into their appropriate locations. So one trick that I do is I go over the stem surfaces that make contact with the inner wall section of the model with an X-Acto knife. Just a few passes removes a little bit of material, and this will loosen up the tolerances, will make the installation go by a bit easier. Generally on these World War Toons models, when you're installing the pegs, the amount of force that you'll need to exhibit in order to overcome the piece to get it in place in some occasions will be more than the stem can take, and you'll break the stem before it'll actually seat in place. And what's worse, sometimes you'll have a broken piece sticking out of the model, neither of which is an ideal situation. So to thwart that, by just going over those surfaces with an X-Acto, it smooths this out and it makes the installation go by much easier. This is double true for my builds because, as I've mentioned on many of these videos, the wheels and the track are the last things that get fitted to the model at the end of the build, so by then they're already painted and weathered. The pieces are a bit snug, left in the natural plastic. However, this is made a bit stiffer when you have an extra layer or two of paint to contend with. So the X-Acto trick is double recommended if you're like me and you paint your models before the final assembly. That's basically it for the suspension. The tracks went on without any problems. The remainder of the details are pretty nicely rendered overall, as I touched upon before. One thing that I do want to touch upon involves the superstructure here. First, you can see the machine gun section. This was drilled out, as I generally do on my builds for the same reasons and with the same technique. I used a pin vise with a small Dremel bit. The next thing I want to touch upon is with the boxy superstructure. You see, with the way the 38T is designed, you have this piece, and it's a multi-component setup where you have 3 or 4 parts that get glued together in this box format, and then you could mount it to the upper hull. It's a easy piece to assemble. However, one thing that I encountered on this particular build is with the front plate. You see, the front plate is designed, or I should say needs to have a small revision done with some of the internal pegs. If you build the model out of the box, the front plate's not going to seat properly, and you're actually going to have quite a substantial gap found in this section over here. On this model, during the dry fitting, I seen the issue arose, and in order to thwart it, I went ahead and hand fit the front plate to the piece. Basically what I did was, with an X-Acto, I cut away certain blocks that are found on the molding that are actually used as an alignment piece, and it's supposed to plug in place on the front section over here with corresponding accoutrements on the inside. Well, I found that that didn't really work, and it was actually inhibiting the piece to be seated in fully, so it was best to amputate them outright, and this made the piece fit in place in a much better manner. However, even with those pieces removed, I still encountered a small seam found in these areas over here where the plates interconnect with each other, and this was something that's unavoidable. In order to remove the seams, I just used a little bit of super glue and some extreme fine sanding with some sandpaper, as well as a needle file, and with some very precision wet sanding, I was able to carefully buff away the seam. And why this is important is because on 38T we have these rivets that are molded into this front plate over here, and in order to keep them, you do have to be very careful with the seam removal. Once this was done, however, the remainder of the build was a breeze. And even though I said all of that, this may sound like it's something that's very difficult. This is just basic modeling skills and was done in practically no time. But again, with the context of these World War Toons models, this was like the biggest hurdle to encounter on this particular build. While on the front section, you get to see the remainder of details. We have that interesting ring setup that's found on the 30AT family. We have the no-tech blackout light, and we also have a antenna base. The antenna base is decently rendered, and in order to just make it shine further, I painted in the same format that I mentioned on all my other German World War II AFE videos. The antenna base itself is painted to replicate rubber, the little section over here would be brass, and then the remainder of the antenna would be just straight up flat black. Continuing on the side takes to the tools, and the tools on this model are very snug with how they mount onto the kit corresponding holes. And just like I mentioned on these World War Toons models, it's a good idea to enlarge the hole slightly with a pin vise with a very small Dremel bit. This is done so that the pieces install much more easily and you don't run the risk of potentially damaging the piece, like I mentioned before with the road wheels, where if there's just a little bit about material remove, both of these pieces just go on without any problems, and it just makes for a quicker and easier build overall. Moving rearward takes us to the exhaust manifold. I did touch upon this before, and here you get to see what the piece looks like now fully assembled. This is a multi-component piece, and this means you do have some seam work to contend with. However, the seam work is very easily accomplished with a little bit of super glue and some sandpaper. After just a little polishing here or there, the piece is absolutely seamless, and overall it's a nicely rendered component. Also on this section over here, you get to see the tail lights. We have the red tail light as well as the blackout light with the little green boxes. It's a mirror image on the opposite side, and both of them were painted identically. The tail light itself was painted in red, while the squares on the blackout light were painted with gloss green, as they would be found on the actual vehicle. Moving upward to the turret, it was a very simple assembly, but one thing I do want to mention involves the trunnion. The piece, once it's fully assembled, you have the risk of there being a blind spot with the paint. So one thing that I recommend doing is prior to the assembly of the turret, you go ahead and you thoroughly prime the component and also add the base coat to it before the installation. This is a great way to prevent any sort of paint gaps which can possibly hurt the look of the model. Once this is done, you can lower and elevate the piece and not run the risk of having something left in bare plastic. While on this section, I also drilled out the center portion here of the barrel via a Dremel. It's a little tricky to get in camera because everything is pretty black in there, but it's another way to further enhance the build compared to the stock offering. On that note, I did the same thing to the coax that we have right over here for the same reason that I mentioned before on the Bow MG. Moving upward takes us to the Commander's cupola, as well as also the remainder of the periscopes on this model. Just like on all of my builds, I like to render these in gloss black, and on this model here, I use a little swipe of Tamiya gloss black, and then to further enhance the sheen, a secondary swipe of gloss lacquer is added after the paint fully sets. Once the lacquer sets, it really gives you a nice little sheen on all of the periscopes, and it's another way to further enhance your build. On the very top portion of the tank, we have the commander's hatch, and it is fully functional, as you can see. And on this one here, the hatch is decently designed with the hinges. The hinges are a bit on the small and frail side. However, the hatch does open up very nicely and stays in place. On some of the other earlier World War Toons models, the hatches have a habit on just clipping in place, and they're not really held on in a secure manner. But on this one here, that's not really the case, and the hatch works very, very well. And that's really it for the vehicle's details, and this brings us to the paint and the markings. For the model, I went with a dark Panzer gray, as this would be very appropriate for the vehicle in question. The paint and weathering are done with my usual techniques with washes, dry brushing, and filters in order to get the look that we see here. The markings are the kit supply decals and are excellent, as I predicted earlier in the unboxing portion. Of course, once the decals were mounted in place, the entire vehicle was sealed with VMS matte varnish, giving you the look that we see here. As I often mention in these videos, the VMS varnish is an excellent material, and it's one that I've been using for a little while now for some really good results. At the end of the day, I'm really happy in how this one turned out. These World War Toons models never disappoint and are always a fun and unique addition to add to the collection. And this is a perfect opportunity to slide into skill level and recommendation. These World War Toons models are very, very easy, and basically just about anyone can put one together. From the beginner to the advanced and anyone in between, all of which are definitely capable of throwing one of these, as well as the other World War II's tank kits, up and have some pretty decent results with them. As I touched upon before, the only real area that the builder needs to pay attention to is with the construction of the superstructure. If the builder carefully examines the piece, dry fits it once or twice, and makes the required hand fitting on those certain locations, the builder can easily go through this build with a bit of ease. And that's really all there is to it. The remainder of the kit just went together as any other World War II's model does that I've reviewed in the past. For recommendations, well, if you've seen the other ECA World War II's tank review videos, it's going to be basically copy and paste because all of that is true for this one here. If you're a fan of the video game, this kit here is obviously going to be a no-brainer. If you're also a fan of the Czech 38T tank family, this is another person who I would greatly recommend this kit to. There are people out there that like to collect every single variant of the 38T made by the various model companies that are out there. Well, if that's you, the addition of this kit here to your collection is one that's going to be a very unique and I think a very noteworthy addition. Because of the kit's relatively low cost and high availability, they are an excellent way for an individual to enter into the world of plastic modeling or just plastic tank modeling in general. They go together very, very easily with the minimum amount of modeling skill and techniques, and if you're looking to build up those techniques or practice some other techniques, all of the World War II's tank kits are a nice vessel to do that with. On a similar note, if you're someone that's looking to spend an afternoon with your child or with your grandchild, all of these kits here are a nice way to do so. These kits do have some playability with them, so if you're a youth builder, you're going to appreciate these kits very much. The adult would also appreciate the relative simple build that these models have, so it's not going to be a frustrating experience to share with a younger builder. On a similar note, if you're looking to purchase a gift for somebody, either someone again who's a youth builder or someone who has a huge collection of model tanks and basically this type of person has, everything, this kit over here is something that's fairly unique, and I guarantee you may be something that that type of person doesn't have, but will definitely appreciate. Another person who I'd recommend this kit to would be someone who's looking to practice their painting and weathering skills. In the past, I would recommend a really simple tank kit to do this. However, these days, there really aren't that many of them on the market. You have, kits like the Panther Alpha A from Tamiya, for instance, or the Tamiya Walker Bulldog. However, these World War II's tanks, because of the, again, relatively low cost and high availability, are a great way to practice your painting and weathering skills on a tank-shaped model without having to invest a whole lot of money into something that is more substantial in cost. So like if you have for instance, a 38T from Dragon, one of the more exotic super kits, and you want to try something different with the weathering or with the camo, well, rather than just winging it on that expensive model, you can try practicing it on one of these World War II's tanks in order to get the feel. With the way the model is fully detailed and is shaped, yeah, it's all cartoony and wonky with the angles, but this will really give you a good idea on how it would look when done to the, actual model that you're intending to build. And with that wraps up this model showcase video for this cartoon scale German Panzer 38T. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being small scale model showcase videos like this one over here, or the other larger scale project update videos that frequently get posted to this channel. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of this particular build, as well as the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again, and I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Till then.